There's a particular kind of rage that comes from being disrespected by family, the kind that burns hotter than any professional rivalry, the kind that makes people do things they would never consider rational, the kind that can reshape entire city blocks out of pure spite. In the winter of 1890, Caroline Webster Schermerhorn Astor, the undisputed queen of New York society, stood at the window of her mansion at 355th Avenue and looked out at the most beautiful view money could buy. To the south stretched the avenue she had helped make fashionable. To the north lay the homes of families who had spent decades trying to win her approval. But before we dive into the most expensive family feud in American history, the petty war that literally built one of the world's most famous hotels, hit that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to witness is architectural revenge. On a scale that makes modern celebrity feuds look like playground squabbles, turn on notifications because we're about to expose how the wealthy turned family drama into landmarks. And trust me, the pettiness on display here is so magnificent, so perfectly calculated, that you'll never look at luxury hotels the same way again. Subscribe now, because the stories we're uncovering prove that the rich really are different. They build monuments to their grudges. This is the story of how Caroline Astor's nephew, William Waldorf-Astor, built a massive hotel right next to her mansion specifically to destroy her peace. How she responded by calling it a glorified tavern and then building an even bigger hotel to overshadow his, and how their feud, petty and personal and absolutely magnificent in its vindictiveness, created the Waldorf-Astoria, one of the most iconic hotels in the world. But this isn't just about two wealthy people being petty. Though they were spectacularly petty, it's about how family dynamics among the ultra-wealthy operate, how inheritance and social position create battlegrounds, how pride and revenge can become more valuable than money, and how sometimes the greatest achievements come from the worst motivations. Caroline Astor was born in 1830 into the family, Old Dutch money that traced back to colonial New York. But the Schermerhorns, while respectable, were not the wealthiest family in the city. Caroline understood from an early age that social position and actual wealth were different things, and she was determined to have both. In 1853, at age 23, she married William Backhouse Astor Jr., grandson of John Jacob Astor, the fur trader and real estate speculator who had died in 1848 as the wealthiest man in America, worth an estimated $20 million, roughly $600 million in today's currency. The Astor fortune was primarily in Manhattan real estate. John Jacob had bought up huge tracts of what was then undeveloped land, betting that the city would expand northward. He was right, and the family collected rent from thousands of properties. As the city grew around their holdings, by the time Caroline married into the family, the Astors were worth an estimated $50 million, roughly $1.5 billion today. They were the richest family in New York, possibly in America, but wealth alone didn't guarantee social position. The Astors were still considered new money by the Knickerbocker families who had been in New York since the 1600s, and the explosion of industrial fortunes during the Gilded Age meant that being rich wasn't distinctive anymore. Vanderbilts and Morgans and Rockefellers were creating fortunes that dwarfed even the Astors. Caroline understood that if the Astor name was going to maintain preeminence, it needed to dominate not just economically but socially. Someone needed to define who was acceptable and who wasn't, who belonged in society and who didn't. She decided that someone would be her. Over 3 decades, from 1860 to 1890, Caroline Astor systematically established herself as the arbiter of New York society. She created the list of acceptable families, the famous 400. Supposedly the number of people who could fit in her ballroom, but really just the number of people she deemed worthy. If Caroline Astor invited you to her annual ball, you were somebody. If she didn't, you weren't. It was that simple and that brutal. She partnered with Ward McAllister, a social climber who understood the mechanics of exclusivity. Together, they created elaborate rules for who could be received in polite society, how long you needed to be wealthy to be accepted, which industries were respectable and which weren't, what kind of behavior was tolerated and what wasn't. It was arbitrary, often cruel, and incredibly effective. Caroline became known simply as the Mrs. Astor, as if no other woman with that surname mattered. When newspapers referred to Mrs. Astor, without further identification, everyone knew they meant Carolyn. Her mansion at 355th Avenue, built in 1859, became the center of New York society. The ballroom where she held her annual January ball was the most important room in America. More power was exercised there than in many government buildings. Caroline ruled from this mansion for 30 years, and she was a skilled ruler. She knew how to use exclusion as a weapon, how to make people desperate for her approval, how to maintain her position by carefully controlling access to it. But by 1890, Caroline was 60 years old, and her control was beginning to slip, not because she was less formidable, but because the world was changing. New money was flooding into New York. Industrialists who didn't care about old social rules, who had enough wealth to create their own society if the existing one wouldn't accept them. And more threateningly, the Astor family itself was fracturing. Caroline had 4 children who survived to adulthood, but the male heir who would inherit the bulk of the fortune was her nephew, William Waldorf-Astor, son of her husband's brother, John Jacob Astor III. William Waldorf, born in 1848, was everything Caroline wasn't: intellectual, cultured, interested in art and literature, uncomfortable with the crude mechanisms of social climbing. He had been educated at Columbia and Heidelberg, spoke multiple languages, wrote novels and poetry. He was a sophisticated man in a family that valued money and power over culture. He was also resentful, deeply resentful of Caroline. William Waldorf believed that as the eldest male Astor of his generation, as the one who would inherit the largest share of the family fortune, he should be recognized as the head of the family. Caroline disagreed. She had spent 30 years establishing herself as the Mrs. Astor. She had no intention of ceding that position to her nephew. No matter what the inheritance laws said, this conflict came to a head in 1890, when William Waldorf's wife, Mary Paul Astor, began calling herself Mrs. Astor in social correspondence. It seems like a small thing, a matter of how someone signed their name, but in the rigid world of Gilded Age society, it was a declaration of war. There could only be one. Mrs. Astor and Caroline had held that title for 3 decades. Mary's presumption in claiming it was in direct challenge to Caroline's authority. Caroline's response was swift and brutal. She made it clear through her social network that Mary Waldorf Astor was not the Mrs. Astor, that she was merely a pretender, that anyone who accepted Mary's claim would not be received by Caroline, given that Caroline still controlled access to New York society. This was an effective threat. People chose Caroline. William Waldorf was furious. He saw this as his aunt, putting her pride above family unity, using her social position to deny his wife the recognition she deserved. But more than that, he saw it as emblematic of how his entire life had been overshadowed by Caroline. Despite his wealth, his education, his accomplishments, he would always be secondary to his aunt in the family hierarchy. He decided to do something about it. Something dramatic, something that would force Caroline to acknowledge his power or destroy her peace. Trying, in late 1890, William Waldorf Astor purchased a plot of land adjacent to Caroline's mansion, the property at 33rd Street and 5th Avenue, right next door to 355th Avenue, and he announced that he was going to build something spectacular, a hotel, the largest, most luxurious hotel New York had ever seen, 13 stories tall, filling the entire block, with a kitchen that could serve 1,000 guests simultaneously, right next to Caroline Astor's mansion. It was architectural warfare, and everyone understood exactly what he was doing. To understand why William Waldorf Astor's decision to build a hotel next to his aunt's mansion was so devastating, you need to understand what hotels represented in 1890s New York society. Hotels were not respectable. They were commercial establishments, places where people conducted business, where traveling salesmen stayed, where people of uncertain background mingled. Respectable people, wealthy people, lived in private homes or maintained apartments in exclusive buildings. They did not live in hotels, and they certainly didn't want hotels in their neighborhoods. The finest residential areas of New York were carefully protected from commercial intrusion. Fifth Avenue from Washington Square to Central Park was supposed to be exclusively residential, a parade of mansions belonging to the city's wealthiest families. Having a hotel in your neighborhood suggested your area was declining, becoming commercial, no longer exclusive. Having a hotel directly adjacent to your mansion was an announcement that your property or position was under siege. William Waldorf knew this perfectly. He was making a calculated decision to destroy the exclusivity of Caroline's location, to bring commerce and crowds and noise right to her doorstep. When news of his plans became public in January 1891, New York society was scandalized. How could he do this to his own aunt? Society matrons whispered at teas and dinners, but others, particularly those who had been excluded by Caroline over the years, found it deliciously entertaining. Finally, one woman was quoted in the New York Tribune. "Someone is putting that woman in her place. She's ruled society like a tyrant for 30 years. Perhaps it's time she learned that even queens can be dethroned." Caroline's initial response was public dismissal. When asked about her nephew's plans at a dinner party, she waved her hand dismissively. "William has always had peculiar ideas," she said. "I'm sure this is just another of his eccentricities. A hotel, really? How very commercial, but privately." She was furious, and she was planning. The construction of what William Waldorf named the Waldorf Hotel began in spring 1891, and it was designed specifically to maximize the insult. The architect was Henry Janeway Hardenberg, who had already established his reputation with the Dakota apartment building. Hardenberg understood what William Waldorf wanted. He wanted something massive, imposing, something that would dwarf Caroline's mansion. The Waldorf would be 13 stories tall. Caroline's mansion was 4 stories. It would be built in the German Renaissance Revival style. Elaborate, ornate, covered in carved limestone and decorative details. It would be so magnificent that it would make the neighboring mansion look small and plain by comparison. The entrance would be on 33rd Street, directly beside Caroline's property line, meaning that every day, hundreds of guests would be arriving and departing right next to her home. The service entrance, where deliveries would be made, where garbage would be removed, where the constant traffic of a large hotel would flow, was positioned to maximize noise and disruption to Caroline's property. The hotel would have a restaurant, a bar, multiple dining rooms, a ballroom that could hold 1,200 people, 300 more than Caroline's famous ballroom. William Waldorf was not just building a hotel, he was building a deliberate repudiation of everything Caroline's mansion represented. Where she represented exclusivity, he would offer access to anyone who could pay. Where she represented quiet residential dignity, he would bring commercial bustle. Where she held her carefully curated ball for 400, he would have a ballroom. For 1,200, construction proceeded through 1891 and 1892. And with each month, the building rose higher, casting more shadow over Caroline's property. Caroline watched from her windows as the hotel took shape. Each floor that went up was another level of insult, another degree of encroachment. Her friends visited and expressed sympathy, but sympathy didn't solve the problem. Caroline's mansion was being overshadowed. Literally and figuratively, the noise was constant. Construction from dawn until dusk, the sound of workers, of stone being cut, of steel being hammered. Caroline, who had always valued the quiet dignity of her home, was now living next to what was essentially a factory, and she knew it would only get worse. Once the hotel opened, the noise wouldn't stop. It would just change character from construction sounds to commercial sounds. Guests arriving at all hours, deliveries, celebrations. In the ballroom, her property value was declining. Who would want to buy a mansion next to a hotel? Her social position was being undermined. How could you claim to be the queen of society while living next to a commercial establishment? William Waldorf was destroying her, systematically and deliberately. And everyone was watching. In June 1892, as the hotel neared completion, Caroline gave an interview to the New York Times. It was unusual for her to speak to the press. She generally maintained dignified silence, but she was angry and she wanted her position known. "My nephew has chosen to build what amounts to a glorified tavern next to my home," she told a reporter. "I suppose he believes this is some sort of accomplishment, but really, it simply demonstrates that money cannot buy taste or respect for family." The phrase glorified tavern became immediately famous. It was repeated in newspapers across the country. It was discussed at dinner parties. It was exactly the kind of cutting insult that Caroline specialized in. By calling the hotel a tavern, she was reducing it to the level of common drinking establishment, suggesting that for all its luxury and expense, it was fundamentally low class. William Waldorf's response came through the newspapers as well. He didn't dignify her insult with a direct reply. Instead, he simply announced more extravagant details about the hotel. The main dining room would be called the Empire Room. It would seat 500. The decor would feature imported marble from Italy, crystal chandeliers from France, carpets from Persia. The bar would stock the finest whiskeys, wines, and champagnes available. The kitchen would be run by Oscar Cherky, who would become famous as Oscar of the Waldorf. Every announcement was another provocation, emphasizing the scale, the luxury, the commercial success that William Waldorf was confident the hotel would achieve. The Waldorf Hotel opened on March 14, 1893, and the opening was everything William Waldorf had hoped for. 1,500 guests attended the opening night gala, far more than Caroline's ballroom had ever held. The press coverage was extensive and laudatory. The hotel was praised as the finest in America, perhaps in the world. Rooms cost between $3 and $5 per night, expensive for the era, but they were fully booked within days. The restaurant became immediately fashionable. Oscar's innovations, including the Waldorf salad, became sensations. The hotel was not just successful, it was a cultural phenomenon, and it was right next door to Caroline Astor's mansion. Caroline attended a dinner party 3 weeks after the hotel opened. When asked how she was tolerating living next to the Waldorf, she smiled tightly. "I find I'm tolerating it very well," she said. "In fact, I've been making some plans of my own." No one understood what she meant. But they would soon, because Caroline Astor had not been passive during the construction of the Waldorf. She had been planning her response, and that response would be even more dramatic than William Waldorf's original provocation. If her nephew wanted a war, Caroline would give him a war, and she would win. Caroline Astor's response to the Waldorf Hotel was not immediate. She was too strategic for that. She understood that rage, however justified, needed to be channeled into effective action. She spent the winter and spring of 1893 watching the Waldorf's success, taking note of how it operated, what made it profitable, what attracted guests. And she was doing something else, something that William Waldorf didn't discover until it was too late. She was talking to her son, John Jacob Astor, born in 1864, was Caroline's only surviving son. He was 29 years old in 1893 already, wealthy from his inheritance, interested in invention and science. He had patents on several devices, including an improved bicycle brake. John Jacob IV was also deeply loyal to his mother. He had watched William Waldorf's provocation with growing anger. His mother had been insulted, her home had been overshadowed, her position had been challenged. Caroline met with her son in May 1893, in the parlor of the mansion that was now living in the shadow of the Waldorf. "I want you to consider something," she told him. "This mansion sits on extremely valuable land, perhaps the most valuable residential land in New York." John Jacob understood immediately where she was going. "You want to sell it?" he said. "I want to do better than sell it," Caroline said. "I want to do to William exactly what he did to me, except I want to do it bigger, better, more successful." She had a plan, and it was magnificent in its pettiness. Caroline owned the mansion at 355th Avenue, but John Jacob owned the land immediately to the north. At 34th Street and 5th Avenue, another mansion that had belonged to William Backhouse Astor Jr., Caroline's late husband. If Caroline sold her mansion and John Jacob developed his land, they could build a hotel even larger than the Waldorf, directly adjacent to it on the other side. William Waldorf had sandwiched Caroline's mansion between his hotel and the street. Caroline and John Jacob would sandwich William Waldorf's hotel between two massive buildings. But there was more to the plan than simple revenge. Caroline proposed that their hotel would not just be adjacent to the Waldorf, it would be designed to connect to it. If William Waldorf agreed, the two hotels could be joined, creating the largest hotel in the world. If he refused, their hotel would be a direct competitor, stealing his business, undercutting his prices, outluxuriating his luxury. Either way, Caroline won. If the hotels merged, she would be part owner of the combined property, sharing credit for the success. If they remained separate, she would have the satisfaction of competing directly with her nephew. It was brilliant, petty, vindictive, and financially sound, the perfect combination. John Jacob Astor agreed immediately. Construction plans were drawn up in secret through the summer of 1893. In September 1893, Caroline made her announcement not through the newspapers this time, but in the most cutting way possible, at her annual ball. The ball in January 1893 had been awkward, held in a ballroom that everyone knew was smaller than the one in the hotel next door. Caroline had maintained her dignity, but the reality of her diminished position was evident. But at the ball in January 1894, Caroline was triumphant. She waited until dinner had been served, until all 400 of her guests were seated, until she had everyone's attention. Then she stood and made an announcement. "I want to thank you all for attending tonight," she said. "This will be the last ball held in this location. As many of you know, my nephew William Waldorf saw fit to build a hotel next to my home, disrupting the residential character of this neighborhood." There was uncomfortable silence. Everyone knew this story. "I have therefore decided," Caroline continued, "that if this block is to be commercial rather than residential, I might as well profit from that reality. My son John Jacob and I will be demolishing both our mansions and building a hotel that will make the Waldorf look like, well, the glorified tavern it is." The room erupted. This was the most dramatic social announcement in years. "The Astoria Hotel," Caroline said, and the name was deliberate. Her hotel would be named for the family. Where William Waldorf had merely used Waldorf, his middle name, will be 17 stories tall. We'll have 500 rooms. We'll be the most luxurious hotel, not just in New York, but in the entire world, and it will open in 1897. She paused, letting this information settle. "I've also sent word to my nephew that, should he wish to discuss connecting our properties, I would be amenable to negotiation." Imagine, the Waldorf-Astoria, the largest hotel in the world, owned jointly by our branch of the family. It would be quite the legacy. This was Caroline at her most strategic. She was offering William Waldorf a way to save face, a way to turn their feud into a family triumph, but she was also threatening him. If he refused, she would compete directly, and given her social connections, her understanding of what wealthy guests wanted, she might very well destroy his business. The newspapers the next day were full of the story. Mrs. Astor strikes back. Hotel war on Fifth Avenue. Architectural revenge. Society was divided. Some thought Caroline was being petty, that she was lowering herself by engaging in commercial warfare. Others thought she was being brilliant, turning her nephew's insult into an opportunity. William Waldorf-Astoria was in England when he received the news. He had moved there in 1891. Ostensibly because he preferred European culture, but really because he had lost the social war with Caroline and couldn't stand to remain in New York. His first instinct was to refuse any cooperation, to let Caroline build her hotel and hope it failed. But his business advisors pointed out the reality. Caroline had the social connections to make the Astoria successful. She knew everyone worth knowing in New York, in European society. If the Astoria opened in competition with the Waldorf, it would split the luxury hotel market. Both properties might suffer. But if the hotels were connected, if they were marketed as a single entity, they would have an overwhelming competitive advantage. No other hotel could match their size, their luxury, their prestige. After 3 months of negotiation through lawyers, William Waldorf agreed to the merger. The Waldorf and Astoria would be connected by a corridor. Officially, they would be a single hotel, the Waldorf-Astoria, but each family would maintain ownership of their respective buildings. The agreement included a provision that became famous. Either family could sever the connection by closing a set of heavy steel doors built into the corridor. If the partnership became untenable, they could literally wall each other off. Construction of the Astoria began in 1895, with Caroline overseeing every detail. If William Waldorf had built something impressive, Caroline was determined to build something transcendent. The construction of the Astoria Hotel from 1895 to 1897 was not merely a building project. It was a continuation of the Astor family war by other means. Every design choice, every architectural detail, every luxury amenity was weighted with the subtext of competition. Caroline Astor had hired Henry Janeway Hardenberg as architect, the same architect who had designed the Waldorf for William Waldorf. This was a deliberate choice. She wanted someone who understood the Waldorf intimately, who could design something that would surpass it. Hardenberg understood the assignment. He was being asked to one-up his own previous work, to take everything that had made the Waldorf successful and amplify it. The Astoria would be 7 stories tall, 4 stories taller than the Waldorf. It would have 500 rooms compared to the Waldorf's 450, but height and size were just the beginning. Caroline wanted the Astoria to be more luxurious, more fashionable, more desirable than William Waldorf's hotel. The main ballroom would hold 1,500 people, 300 more than the Waldorf's. It would have a ceiling height of 25 feet, allowing for more elaborate chandeliers, more dramatic decorations. The Empire Room in the Waldorf was impressive. So the Astoria would have the Astor Gallery, a dining room that doubled as an art gallery, displaying Caroline's personal collection of paintings. Every public room in the Astoria was designed to subtly outdo its equivalent in the Waldorf. The Waldorf had marble from Italy. The Astoria would have marble from Carrara, the same quarries that had provided stone for Michelangelo. The Waldorf had crystal chandeliers from France. The Astoria's chandeliers would be customized larger, more intricate. The Waldorf's carpets were Persian. The Astorias would be specially commissioned from the finest weavers in Isfahan. Caroline was not just building a hotel, she was building a statement. Every element was chosen to demonstrate that her taste, her understanding of luxury exceeded her nephew's. John Jacob Astor, who was nominally in charge of the construction, understood that his mother's reputation was at stake. He spared no expense. The budget for the Astoria exceeded $3 million, roughly $90 million in today's currency, nearly twice what William Waldorf had spent on the Waldorf. But Caroline's strategy went beyond mere architectural one-upmanship. She understood that a hotel's success depended on its guests, and she had spent 40 years cultivating relationships with exactly the people who would make the Astoria fashionable. She began a campaign, informal but highly effective, of letting it be known through her social network that the Astoria would be her hotel, that she would be maintaining her apartment there, that she would be receiving guests there. This was crucial. Caroline Astor receiving guests at the Astoria meant that being invited to the Astoria was equivalent to being invited to one of her private balls. It meant that the Astoria would have social legitimacy that no amount of marble and crystal could purchase. The Waldorf was successful, but it was commercial success. Wealthy travelers stayed there. Businessmen held meetings there. It was respectable but not exclusive. The Astoria would be different. It would be where society stayed when in New York. It would be not just a hotel but a social institution. William Waldorf, watching from England, understood what Caroline was doing, and it infuriated him. He had built the Waldorf to escape his aunt's shadow, to prove that he could create something significant without her approval. Now she was taking his creation and making it part of hers. The Waldorf-Astoria would forever be associated with Caroline, not with him. He considered severing the connection, closing the steel doors that would allow the hotels to separate. But his business advisors were adamant. The combined hotel was already generating enormous interest. Reservations were being made months in advance. The prospect of staying in the world's largest and most luxurious hotel was irresistible to wealthy travelers. Separating the properties would be financial suicide. William Waldorf was trapped. He had started a war he couldn't win, and now he had to accept terms of surrender disguised as partnership. The Astoria Hotel opened on November 1, 1897, with a gala that made the Waldorf's opening look modest by comparison. 2,500 guests attended, the largest social gathering in New York history. Caroline Astor received guests in the grand ballroom wearing a diamond tiara and a necklace that had belonged to Marie Antoinette. She was 77 years old, but still formidable, still commanding. Every important family in New York was there. Vanderbilts, Belmonts, Whitneys, everyone who mattered in society. The press coverage was ecstatic. The Astoria was praised as the finest hotel in the world. The ballroom was called a palace. The dining rooms were compared to Versailles, and the connection to the Waldorf was emphasized. The Waldorf-Astoria, 1,800 rooms, the largest hotel on earth. Caroline had one. Completely and definitively, William Waldorf sent a telegram of congratulations from London. It was brief and formal. Best wishes on the opening of the Astoria. May it be successful. Caroline read the telegram and smiled. She had broken her nephew's will. He had tried to destroy her peace, and she had responded by claiming credit for his achievement. The glorified tavern he had built out of spite was now part of her legacy. But Caroline's victory was more than personal satisfaction, it was financial. The Waldorf-Astoria became immediately profitable. Occupancy rates exceeded 90%. The restaurants were fully booked weeks in advance. The ballrooms hosted the most important social events in New York. Within 2 years, the combined property was generating over $2 million annually in revenue. Roughly $60 million today, it became the model for luxury hotels worldwide. Every major city wanted its own version. London, Paris, Rome, all built hotels modeled on the Waldorf-Astoria's combination of size and luxury. The hotel industry was transformed. Before the Waldorf-Astoria hotels were functional places to sleep while traveling. After the Waldorf-Astoria, hotels became destinations, places where people stayed, not out of necessity but for the experience. Peacock Alley, the corridor connecting the Waldorf and Astoria, became famous as a place to see and be seen. People would promenade through it, displaying their fashionable clothing, greeting friends, engaging in the social rituals that had previously been confined to private homes. The Waldorf-Astoria became a public stage for private society, and Caroline Astor was its director. She maintained an apartment on the 5th floor of the Astoria, smaller than her mansion had been but still elegant. And from there she continued to rule society for another decade. When she died in 1908, her funeral was held in the Astoria's ballroom. The room she had built to surpass her nephew's achievement. 3,000 people attended. It was the largest funeral New York society had ever witnessed. William Waldorf Astor did not attend. He remained in England, where he had purchased Hever Castle and was living as an expatriate. He would eventually be made a Viscount by the British government, becoming the first American to sit in the House of Lords. But even that distinction was overshadowed by what Caroline had accomplished, because when people said the Astors, they meant Caroline's branch of the family. When they thought of Astor achievements, they thought of the hotel. William Waldorf had won the battle but lost the war. The Waldorf operated at its original Fifth Avenue location from 1897 until 1929, 32 years during which it defined luxury hospitality not just in New York but worldwide. Every innovation, every luxury standard, every expectation of what a grand hotel should be was established at the Waldorf-Astoria. Room service was standardized there. Before the Waldorf-Astoria, hotel guests who wanted food brought to their rooms had to negotiate individually with kitchen staff. Oscar Cherky developed the concept of a hotel having its own signature cuisine. The Waldorf salad, eggs Benedict, Thousand Island dressing, all were created or popularized at the hotel. The idea that a hotel should have multiple restaurants, each with different cuisine and ambience, that was a Waldorf-Astoria innovation. The concept of a hotel ballroom as a venue for society events, for weddings and charity galas and debutante balls, that became standard because of the Waldorf. The practice of hotels having resident orchestras, of music being part of the dining experience, that was established at the Waldorf-Astoria. Every luxury hotel built in the 20th century From the Ritz in Paris to the Savoy in London to the Peninsula in Hong Kong was influenced by the Waldorf-Astoria model, and that model existed because Caroline Astor refused to be outdone by her nephew. The petty family feud, the personal vindictiveness, the determination to one-up each other regardless of cost. All of that spite produced something genuinely significant. This is one of history's strange lessons, that sometimes the greatest achievements come from the worst motivations. The Sistine Chapel exists partly because Pope Julius II was competing with other popes and wanted something that would eclipse their achievements. Versailles was built partly because Louis XIV wanted to surpass the palaces of other European monarchs. The space race happened because the United States and Soviet Union were competing, trying to prove their systems superior. Competition, even petty competition, even competition motivated by revenge, can drive innovation. The Waldorf-Astoria was a monument to family dysfunction, but it was also a genuine advancement in hospitality. By 1929, however, the original location had become problematic. Fifth Avenue was no longer residential. The neighborhood around the hotel had become completely commercial. More importantly, the Empire State Building Corporation wanted the site. The plot where the Waldorf-Astoria stood was perfect for what they planned: a skyscraper that would be the world's tallest building. The Astor family, now in its fourth generation since Caroline's death, negotiated a deal. They would sell the Fifth Avenue property and build a new Waldorf-Astoria further uptown. On Park Avenue between 49th and 50th Streets, the new hotel would be even larger, 47 stories, 2,100 rooms. It would be the largest hotel in the world when it opened in 1931. The original Waldorf and Astoria were demolished in 1929, watching the demolition. One Society columnist wrote, "They're tearing down Caroline Astor's revenge, but the legend will outlive the building." She was right, because the Waldorf-Astoria name, the association with luxury and prestige that survived the move. The Park Avenue Waldorf-Astoria opened on October 1, 1931. In the depths of the Great Depression, the timing was terrible. The economy had collapsed. Luxury hotels were struggling, but the Waldorf-Astoria succeeded anyway, partly because of the fame of its name, partly because it offered something people craved during the Depression: a glimpse of elegance and luxury, an escape from economic misery. Every president from Herbert Hoover to Barack Obama stayed at the Waldorf-Astoria when visiting New York. The hotel maintained a presidential suite specifically for this purpose. The Waldorf Towers became home to permanent residents, including former President Herbert Hoover, who lived there for 30 years, and Cole Porter, who lived there from 1935 until his death in 1964. The Waldorf-Astoria became an American institution, a symbol of New York's sophistication. When Frank Sinatra sang about New York, when Hollywood depicted elegant city life, the Waldorf-Astoria was the inevitable setting. All because William Waldorf Astor wanted to spite his aunt, and she responded by spiting him right back. In 2014, the Waldorf-Astoria was sold to a Chinese insurance company for $1.95 billion, the most expensive hotel sale in history at that time. The building that Caroline and William Waldorf's feud had inspired, not the original but its successor, was worth nearly $2 billion. That's the ultimate irony. The monument to their pettiness became ONAF, the most valuable properties on earth. Would it have been built without their feud? Probably not. William Waldorf might never have conceived of building a hotel, if not for his resentment of Caroline. Caroline certainly would never have demolished her mansion to build the Astoria if William Waldorf hadn't provoked her. Exists because two wealthy people couldn't stand each other and had the resources to express that hatred through architecture. The story of the Waldorf-Astoria reveals something fundamental about how the ultra-wealthy express conflict. They don't just argue, they build. Normal people have feuds that involve angry words. Maybe lawsuits, maybe cutting each other out of wills. The wealthy have feuds that reshape city blocks, that create landmarks, that become part of history. This is because wealth gives you options for expression that others don't have. You can do things with that anger that people with ordinary resources can only imagine. 90 million in today's currency, building a physical monument to that resentment. Caroline didn't just tell her nephew that his provocation was inappropriate. She spent $3 million building a response. $6 million, $180 million today, spent on what was essentially an argument. And the remarkable thing is that this wasn't unusual. The Gilded Age is full of examples of wealthy families expressing conflicts through architecture. The Vanderbilts built competing mansions in Newport, each trying to outdo the others. Marble House, the Breakers, Rose Cliff, all were partly expressions of family competition. The Huntington family feud in California resulted in competing art collections, competing libraries, competing gardens, all open to the public today. The Rockefeller brothers' rivalry shaped entire neighborhoods in Manhattan, With different brothers funding different projects to outshine each other, wealth turns personal conflict into public spectacle. Private grievances become civic landmarks. This happens because the wealthy operate in a different economy. Not just a monetary economy, but an economy of legacy. For ordinary people, success means financial security, comfort, maybe leaving something for your children. For the ultra-wealthy, who already have more money than they can spend, success means being remembered, having impact, shaping the world. In visible ways, buildings last. They carry names. They tell stories long after their creators are dead. William Waldorf-Astor is remembered today primarily because of the hotel that bears his name. His novels, his poetry, his diplomatic career, all forgotten, but the hotel remains. Caroline Astor is remembered as the queen of Gilded Age society, but she's also remembered because the Astoria half of the Waldorf-Astoria carries her name there. Feud, petty and personal as it was, gave them both a kind of immortality. This creates a perverse incentive structure. If you're wealthy enough, if you care about legacy, starting conflicts that result in grand buildings is actually rational. You'll be remembered. Your name will persist. You'll have shaped the physical world in ways that can't be erased. The Waldorf-Astoria story also reveals how family dynamics among the ultra-wealthy differ from normal families. In a normal family, inheritance is about distributing limited resources, making sure everyone gets something, trying to be fair. In ultra-wealthy families, inheritance is about distributing power, determining who controls the family legacy, deciding whose vision for the family will dominate. Caroline and William Waldorf weren't fighting about money. Both had more money than they needed. They were fighting about something more valuable, the right to define what Astor meant. Would the Astor name be associated with Caroline's vision of society leadership, or with William Waldorf's vision of cultural sophistication? Would the family be defined by its role in New York, or by its connections to European aristocracy? These questions mattered to them more than financial considerations. This is why William Waldorf could spend $3 million on a spite hotel, why Caroline could demolish her mansion, why neither of them was primarily concerned with profit. They were competing for something they valued more than money, control of the family narrative, and in that competition, Caroline won. History remembers her as the Mrs. Astor. William Waldorf is a footnote. But the irony is that their combined achievement, the Waldorf-Astoria, outlasted both their reputations. Most people today don't know who Caroline Astor was, don't know the family drama behind the hotel. They just know the Waldorf-Astoria as a symbol of luxury. The spite that created it has been forgotten, but the creation remains. This might be the ultimate lesson of the story, that monuments outlive the petty motivations that created them, that architecture transcends the personal conflicts that inspired it. The Waldorf-Astoria began as a weapon in a family war, but it became something larger, a genuine contribution to hospitality, a model that improved how people traveled and lived. The personal became universal. The petty became significant, not because Caroline and William Waldorf were noble, they weren't. Not because they were thinking about the public good. They weren't, but because when you have enough resources, even your worst impulses can produce lasting value. The Waldorf-Astoria story didn't end with Caroline's death in 1908, or with William Waldorf's death in 1919, or with the hotel's move to Park Avenue in 1931. The pattern established by their feud of wealthy families using architecture to express conflict continues today in 2014. When the Waldorf-Astoria was sold to the Chinese Anbang Insurance Group for $1.95 billion, members of the Astor family expressed outrage. Not because they still owned it, they didn't. The property had been sold out of family, controlled decades earlier, but because the name carried their family identity, and they felt they should have been consulted. One Astor descendant was quoted saying, "That hotel represents our family's legacy. Our name is on it. We should have some say in who owns it." This is the entitlement of legacy. The belief that because your ancestors did something significant over a century ago, you deserve consideration today. The Anbang sale fell through eventually. Due to regulatory issues, the company was seized by the Chinese government amid a corruption scandal. But the controversy revealed that the Astor family's obsession with control hadn't disappeared. Today's ultra-wealthy continue the tradition of architectural revenge. When the Winklevoss twins of Facebook lawsuit fame felt disrespected by Mark Zuckerberg, they didn't just sue. They built a cryptocurrency empire partly to prove they could create something as significant as Facebook. When Steve Jobs felt betrayed by John Scully at Apple, he didn't just complain. He built Next and Pixar, companies designed to prove his vision was right. When the Berkeley brothers, British billionaires, had a family feud, they expressed it by building competing luxury developments in London. Wealthy families still resolve conflicts by building things. still compete through architecture and business, rather than through conversation, because at that level of wealth, conversation is meaningless. Words don't prove anything, only achievements do. The Waldorf-Astoria established the template. If you're angry at family, if you feel disrespected, if you want to prove your worth, you build something that dwarfs what they've built. You make your conflict visible, permanent, undeniable. This is both absurd and impressive. Absurd because it's fundamentally childish. It's my building is bigger than yours, with billion-dollar budgets. But impressive because occasionally these petty conflicts produce genuine innovations. The Waldorf-Astoria really did change hospitality, really did establish standards that improved how hotels operate. Space-race rivalry really did advance technology, really did produce innovations that benefit everyone. Competition, even stupid competition, even competition motivated by spite, can drive progress, but there's a darker side to this story. The resources William Waldorf and Caroline spent on their feud could have done enormous good. $6 million in the 1890s, $180 million today. Could have built hospitals, funded universities, provided housing for thousands of poor families. Instead, it went to making sure one hotel was slightly fancier than another, to winning a family argument through architecture. This is the waste of wealth. Not that wealthy people spend money, but that they spend it on symbolic victories rather than substantive change. The Waldorf-Astoria is beautiful. It's historically significant. It contributed to the hospitality industry, but it was built for the wrong reasons. It was built because two people were angry at each other and had the resources to express that. Anger at monumental scale, this raises uncomfortable questions about wealth itself. If having hundreds of millions of dollars makes you more likely to engage in petty feuds at architectural scale, is that actually a problem? Should society allow individuals to accumulate wealth so vast that their personal conflicts reshape cities? Should family arguments result in billion-dollar buildings? There's no easy answer, because limiting wealth means limiting freedom. But unlimited wealth means that the petty grievances of the ultra-rich become everyone else's landscape. We live in the world shaped by their feuds. We work in the buildings they built out of spite. We navigate cities organized around their competitions. The Waldorf-Astoria is just one example, but there are thousands of others. Every time you see a building with a family name on it, there's probably a feud behind it, someone trying to prove something to someone else. Every grand library, every museum, every concert hall, behind the philanthropy is often personal competition. Carnegie libraries exist partly because Andrew Carnegie was competing with Rockefeller for the title of greatest philanthropist. Rockefeller University exists partly because Rockefeller wanted to prove he could contribute to science, like Carnegie contributed to education. The great institutions we benefit from were often created for the pettiest of reasons, and somehow, we're supposed to be grateful. The Waldorf-Astoria story is told as triumph, as American success, as evidence of what ambition can achieve, but it's also a story of what happens when personal conflict is allowed to operate at unlimited scale. Caroline and William Waldorf's feud was amusing. Their architectural war was entertaining. The hotel they created is genuinely impressive, but the cost, not just financial but social. The idea that private grievances should shape public space, that family arguments should result in landmarks, that's troubling, because it means the wealthy don't just have more money, they have more reality. Their feelings, their conflicts, their egos manifest in physical form while the rest of us just have to live around them. The Waldorf-Astoria stands on Park Avenue today, still luxurious, still prestigious, still carrying the names of two people who couldn't stand each other, still making money for its owners, still employing thousands of people, still hosting important events, still serving as monument to the truth that wealth allows you to turn your worst qualities into landmarks. Caroline Astor won her feud. She established that she was the Mrs. Astor. She proved that even a building designed to spite her could be turned to her advantage. But did she win anything that mattered? Did she achieve anything beyond perpetuating her name? Her social empire dissolved within a generation of her death. The 400 became irrelevant. The rigid hierarchies she enforced became obsolete. All that remains is a hotel, expensive and elegant and ultimately just a hotel. William Waldorf. Astor lost his feud. He fled to England, bought a title, tried to pretend he'd never cared about New York society, but his name remains on the hotel. His spite produced something that outlasted his lifetime. Both of them are forgotten by most people, but the building remains. That's the final irony of the Waldorf-Astoria story. The monument to their conflict matters more than they do. The spite was temporary. The architecture is permanent. The personal was petty. The building is grand. They were small people with enormous resources. And somehow, despite themselves, they created something larger than their pettiness. That's the strange alchemy of wealth. It can transform even the worst human qualities into lasting achievements, not because wealthy people are better, but because they can afford to make their failings permanent. The rest of us have feuds that end with angry phone calls or uncomfortable family dinners. The wealthy have feuds that end with buildings that reshape skylines, and we're all supposed to admire the buildings and forget the spite that created them. But maybe we shouldn't forget. Maybe we should remember that the Waldorf-Astoria, for all its elegance, for all its historical significance, for all its genuine contributions to hospitality, was built because a nephew wanted to torment his aunt, and she refused to be tormented quietly. Maybe we should remember that behind every grand building with a family name, there's probably a story just as petty, just as vindictive, just as fundamentally about ego rather than vision. Maybe we should question whether we want to live in a world shaped by the feuds of the wealthy, or whether we might prefer a world where resources are used for something other than winning family arguments. But questioning that world means questioning the fundamental structure of wealth, means asking whether anyone should have the resources to turn their personal conflicts into civic landmarks, and that's a question that makes people uncomfortable because we've been taught to admire the buildings, to celebrate the ambition, to see wealth as aspirational. The Waldorf-Astoria is a monument to family dysfunction and architectural revenge. But it's also considered one of New York's greatest landmarks, and somehow we're expected to see those two facts as unrelated. They're not unrelated. They're the same story. The story of what happens when you give unlimited resources to people with unlimited ego. Sometimes you get beautiful buildings, but you also get a world shaped by spite. And maybe that's not the world we should want to live in, even if the hotels are very, very nice. If this story of billion-dollar pettiness opened your eyes to how the wealthy really operate, smash that subscribe button right now, because we're diving deep into the feuds, scandals, and architectural revenge plots that built America's most iconic landmarks. Hit the notification bell so you never miss the next investigation into how personal grudges became public monuments. Drop a comment telling us which famous building's dark origin story you want us to expose next. Your suggestion might become our next deep dive into the spite that shaped our cities. And if you're as fascinated as we are by how family drama at this scale literally changes skylines, share this video, because understanding that the places we admire were often built for the worst reasons changes how we see wealth, power, and legacy. Subscribe now. The next story is even more vindictive, and the building it produced is even more famous than the Waldorf-Astoria.